All right, Danny, you ready to go?
I am ready to go.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Harris. I am with the Pennsylvania Petroleum Association. I would like to welcome you to our monthly webinar series. We do this each month, the first Tuesday of the month at 9 a.m. You can find a full schedule on our website. Before we get started this morning, I want to just go over a couple light items in regards to GoToWebinar and the platform that we're using. You're going to be muted the entire time, but we do encourage you to ask questions through the question feature. Once Danny's done with his presentation today, we'll go through and we'll answer those questions. And if for some reason we don't get to your question, I will connect you and Danny after the fact for him to provide more details to you. We are also going to be doing some polls today, which is, again, through the GoToWebinar feature. So we encourage your participation there, which will be able to give us some more information and help with the overall presentation. At this point, I would like to introduce our presenter, Danny Silverman, who is with Angus Energy. Danny will be covering the K factor compromise. How well do K factors predict individual deliveries? Danny, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see a good turnout on here. Let's get right into it. Just because something has been around for a while doesn't mean that it's the best thing. There's little argument that the biggest single expense to operate an oil business is the cost of delivering fuel. There's also little argument if you can make fewer deliveries, you would obviously be more profitable. There has always been talk about moving towards more efficient deliveries. Certainly a lot of technology out there now and a lot of good ideas as well that we've been working on with our clients. Updating Ks, reviewing accounts and the like, all to see whether you can move that average delivery up an extra 10, 15, or 20 gallons without the risk of seeing more runouts. I'm here to tell you that I don't think you can take the existing science as it is today and achieve that goal. Today I would like to change the dialogue. I don't want to start with how to take 150 gallons to 165, but I want to ask why we simply can't get to somewhere between 2 and 220 gallons into a 275 tank, and why you are not seeing 30 to 40% increase in your profitability. The answer is that with K-factor delivery methods, it's simply impossible. So if you want to accomplish what we call Mission 220, you will have to find a better way to plan your deliveries. This presentation is going to look into actual Ks, actual weather, and actual consumption, and will explain why most of you are actually doing very well, but based on technology and methods that you currently employ. We will also look at whether the current methodology is going to serve you well in the future. And spoiler alert, it won't. Now, keep in mind that during the seminar, it's going to be fairly math intense, but I think it's something that I have given this before and it seems to be followed well. So do ask questions at the end if there's something that I did not explain well, and let's go on from here. So this is an email exchange between Phil Barrett, our senior partner, and one of our clients. And it says here that the oil dealer said, the reality is computing software does not do a great job with automatic customers. We had 3 runouts this winter and an average delivery of 165, almost as if he's giving up. And what we were trying to explain to them in the response is, if you knew what was in every tank and you targeted and achieved a higher number, not only average, you would probably have a better ROI. And this is what we're trying to get people to understand. So let's get into, we all know what a K factor is, number of degree days divided by number of gallons used. I'm not going to spend much time on these slides because this is what we do every day. When to make the next delivery, you add degree day of usable fuel to the accumulated degree days recorded on the day of delivery, meaning degree day of usable fuel plus the heat and hot water of an everyday delivery. Okay, this is what we see in our systems, right? Looks pretty familiar. K factors of 5.5 in spring and fall, dropping it down to 5.05 in the winter, based on the degree days that we see. And I'm sure many of you have seen this within your systems itself. Okay, so there's an implicit assumption of the correlation between accumulated heat and degree days and fuel consumption. This is one of the things that Angus has been working on right now, that it doesn't necessarily hold true. Is it true that when weather and consumption are correlated closely enough to allow us to use K factors to deliver more than 55%, right? Typically 150 into 275. So if that is true, then why are we only delivering that 55%? There obviously is some difference between the degree days and fuel consumption, and that's what we're going to spend most of the time on. What are our issues? So the issue is, this is how we typically look at life. The human K factor, I thought this was cute. The average human walks 900 miles per year and drinks 22 gallons of beer, which means the average human gets 41 miles per gallon. Not bad. If that was all true, it's a funny one, but it is kind of how we look at life ourselves. What are our issues? So let's take a look here. Automotive K factors. So somebody buys a Honda Accord, right? You're going to see a couple of things here. They're going to get 27 miles per gallon. They're going to average 26 miles EPA, right? They get 23 if they're in the city. They get 32 on the highway. And even more important, there are a whole bunch of different types, right? Are you getting a manual? Are you getting an automatic? What sort of gasoline is it using? What is the cylinder of the engine, etc.? So if you look at all this information, what we typically see, and I've given this in person and challenged people in the audience and said to them, if it has 15 gallons, 15-gallon tank, and it's getting somewhere around 25 gallons of delivery. So the question would be this: if there was no gauge in the car, so 25 times 15, you know you can get 375 gallons. I asked everyone, when would you fill up your car? And everybody said they would never go more than 300 gallons. Why? Because the answer is they can't take a chance to go to the 375 because it will get 375, but what if you were waiting for one of your kids for a half hour and you had the car running? What if you were more in the city that month than you were on the highway? So although you think you can get it, we would never take a chance. Of course, all cars have gauges, but if they didn't have, that would be the problem. And I think that's what we have in our industry. If you think about it, our industry is a tank that is like a car that doesn't have a gauge. And therefore, we choose lower because we can't take the chance. Let me show it to you more in graphic form. So daily HDDs over the last 10 years. This is plotted from October through March on a daily basis what the average heating degree days were per year. Okay? This was last season, 2017-18, right? We had that big cold spurt over here. We had this jumped ahead. Okay, we had the big cold spurt in January, and then it tapped off in February, so it looked a lot different, which means that in certain ways it wasn't comparing to the average HDDs. Okay, we did a study of more than 1,000 customers representing over 200,000 individual tank level readings. And we did this to really understand, as I said before, how does consumption compare to what is really happening on demand. Now, daily consumption, you'll see over here. Okay, this is not deliveries. This is what a person typically consumes from those 1,000 customers that we looked at. And this looks familiar, right? This compares pretty well to the daily HDDs. So the green is the current season, and the gallons are the amount consumed. So if you took those 200,000 deliveries and you looked at them, they compare pretty well. So this is a good argument to say, well, then maybe they do compare well, and why isn't K factor as good as we think it is? Okay, right? You'll see actual usage 205, calculated usage 210, great. 184 and 185, great. Okay, so this looks pretty good. What's the issue? So the problem is, though, that those were just two examples. We do see more often than not that maybe somebody whose actual usage was 187 and the calculated usage was 199, that's all very nice. But what about the 169 that was 224, that was 32% off? I think the second example is more of what we see often. Okay, so why is the average delivery 140 to 150? Can factor math be right, but our deliveries just be wrong? So I don't think so, and I want to show you a couple of things here.
Wait, okay. Before we go on, guys, sorry. Really quickly, we want to launch our first poll. We want to ask you guys, it should show up on your screen, so if you can, just put in the answer. How confident are you right now with your delivery sizes based solely on K factor alone?
And if everybody can just look and kind of answer there. Okay, and we're seeing and growing, the somewhat confident, which is good. We have 70% of the people responded are somewhat confident, and then it's split pretty much between very and not confident at all. And that's good because if you think about it, no one is saying that when this webinar is over, you should walk away from K Factors and never use it again. It's something that will be around for a long time. And it does give it somewhat confidence, but it doesn't give you the numbers that you could have if you were seeing what was actually in the tank. So thank you for answering that. It actually jumped up to 75% somewhat confident. So that does make sense. And the reason for the somewhat confident is because we do have situations like this. We looked at, in that study, of how many of those deliveries to a 275 were 130,000 or less, which would be really too small to be profitable, or over 200 gallons, which is getting towards a run out if we weren't knowing exactly what was in the tank. So if you look at the bottom of the screen here, 39% of those deliveries were either too close for comfort or too small to be profitable, and 1/3 are too small to be profitable. This is an issue that we have. We don't want to be going out and delivering 80, 90 gallons, knowing that a typical delivery costs somewhere around $65 delivery, which is a study that we did and Gray backed up. You're not going to make much money if you're doing those, so we need to work on those. Okay, 1 second. Okay. In addition, what we saw is most of the gallons were far from that average. So even if you were averaging 140, we're seeing that 80% of the gallons are more than 10 gallons away. In all honesty, we were seeing about 50% of the gallons were more than 30 gallons away. So you can see that standard deviation, which we'll get into later, is pretty far. If your average was 140 and every delivery was 140, your standard deviation is 0. Our issue in the industry is they are all over the place. Okay? And as I said before, we said 80% are 10 gallons away. 1 out of every 5 deliveries was more than 50 gallons away from the average. Okay, that's an issue. Okay, so again, we saw weather versus consumption. They seem to match pretty well. So again, what's the problem? So the problem that we have here is that you're looking at a chart right now that when you take an average of all the deliveries, we said there were 200,000 deliveries. It matched well, but that's under the assumption that you took all 200,000 deliveries for all 1,000 customers and you delivered them all on one day of the year. That's why it looks like it matches, but clearly that's not something that we do. We do individual deliveries to individual accounts 5 to 6 times a year. Okay, so right away, this looks like it matches well, but we're just going to give you an example of 3 customers out of the 1,000 customers that we looked at. Here's one that you can see the black line again is the weather, the average, and all of a sudden it doesn't look as good. November, they took a lot less gallons. January seemed pretty good. February took a lot less. So this all of a sudden doesn't match. Again, we're looking at customer number 2. November seemed to be a lower amount. This customer in January, for some reason, even though it was so cold, took a lot less gallons. Why? We don't know, but this is the actual consumption from customer 2. Here's customer 3, actually looked pretty good. Again, some issues in October, but basically matched well. Now the next slide, sorry to ruin everybody's eyes here, but this is taking all 3 of those accounts to show you how different they can be compared to what the actual weather was. The HDD said everybody should be on the blue line. The green, the light blue, and the orange are not even close. And again, if I gray all of this out and take the average of just these 3 customers, you're going to see that all of a sudden it looks again like consumption matches HDDs. So you can imagine if we had 1,000 customers all over the place, you can see what the problem is. Just taking 3 customers, we get very close. If you had 1,000 customers, it's going to match perfectly, assuming that you had all the deliveries on one day at one time. If you start spreading out all of your customers over time, that's not going to happen. So when grouped together, the 3 houses tracked well. Individually, the houses didn't match. You can make deliveries to individual houses, not to groups. That's what the issue is. Okay, so again, paralysis by analysis. On one hand, we have what seems to be a very strong correlation, which should lead to predictable deliveries. On the other hand, we have many deliveries that seem to have little correlation to those HDDs, meaning maybe we're looking at the wrong thing, right? We said before on the left-hand side that we're off, yet on the right-hand side it looked like it matched. Why is this happening? Because again, it's a paradox of all deliveries at one time compared to what really happens. So let's get some clarity. Deliveries are made multiple times a year, fact. Looking at total consumption versus total HDDs might not be enough. We want to look at from a perspective of a typical customer, of a typical dealer. So now what we're going to do is we're going to divide it into those specifics. We're going to use Long Island as an example. If somebody had 800 gallons, which is a standard amount that they'll use per year, if we did 150 gallons, which is what we see from most customers, deliveries per year is 5.33. LaGuardia 10-year average HDDs is 4,300. Therefore, you're going to deliver every 806 gallons. Okay, we're not, the total deliveries, not including hot water, we're trying to keep a very simple example of heating gallons. So therefore, you're going to do about every 800 gallons. Okay, so again, this study that had 100,000 customers, 200,000 readings, 3,200 winter heating degree days out of that 4,300. Okay, so how would that spread out? So again, this should look pretty familiar to everyone. The first 800 heating degree days is going to take you all the way to December 14th, right? We don't do as many deliveries in those first 73 days. Then it's 23 to 24 days in our next two deliveries, and 35 in the last ones going out to March 5th, okay, because it's colder during the winter. That makes sense. You're still seeing that white line that looks like the slide we've been showing you throughout this seminar, so throughout the webinar. So that kind of makes sense to you that you would see more then, okay? Now, before, if you remember, it correlated almost to 98, 99% when you compared all deliveries to a season. What we see now is if we divide the deliveries, okay, not even by customer yet, we're just dividing the deliveries into 4 different times of the year, okay? That first delivery correlates at 91%, so drop from about 98 to 91. The second and the third delivery correlate to 83 and 79%. So now all of a sudden it's not as good, right? We're having a lot more problems in January and February, and that makes sense, right? The old adage of we thought they were going to use X amount of gallons, but they were away for 2 weeks on vacation. We thought they were using X amount of gallons, but grandma came over and they turned the heat up for 2 weeks, and we're off. And that's why the consumption does not match the heating degree days. The demand in your back office system may say they need X amount of gallons, go and do a delivery, but the consumption may have been off because we don't know what was actually there and what was going on. So you can see 83 dropping down to 79 becomes a much bigger issue. Okay, and again, let's look at some homes that we saw. Home number 1, 135, 122, 140. What would we think that the fourth delivery is? Somewhere in that neighborhood, but it was 220. Why? Second one, 112, 107. We don't want to see these low deliveries, but did it correlate for the first one? No, 206. Third one, 216, 228, 220, 262. What was the second? 148. Why? I'm sure we all have our stories of why something like that would happen. And then 86, 99, 93. Of course, yeah, this one's going to match. What a shame. That's the only one that's going to match, which can become a problem. When you look at all of them together, you can see the deliveries of just these 4 homes are all over the place. However, if you put the 4 together, as I said before, you're now going to see that the average comes out where even for just 4 homes, all of a sudden it looks like the K factor works. So I think you guys are all getting the idea that the aggregate is always okay, but when you divide them individually, all of a sudden that correlation doesn't work again. So let's just go through a mini review of what we had said. We shared a lot of numbers. I'm sorry, I said 98%, but when we first did this, correlation of annual usage, all 200,000 deliveries, 94%. When we go down to looking at each of those winter deliveries, it falls to 90% and even lower. Okay, and then when we correlation of aggregate consumption per 800 degree days, right? Meaning we looked into those individual ones. We're now down to, in certain cases, a little over 80. I think if you remember, one of them dropped to 79%. And then if you can't correlate better than 75%, clearly you're taking a risk of runouts. So those deliveries during the winter season that got down into the 80s and into the 70s, you had a big problem there because either it correlated too low and you didn't make any money on about 50% of your deliveries, as we saw, those two middle ones, the January and the February delivery, or you're taking a lot more of a chance of runout. And I think that's the main reason, if you think about it, that we do have runouts, because you're seeing that for individual deliveries to individual customers at individual times of the year, you're now going to 79 down to 67%. Look at that third one, right? Look at the third one. It says initially we were at 94%. If you just take it individually by deliveries during the winter, it goes to 79%. If you take it individually by delivery and now individually by the 1,000 customers and spread it out, your aggregate, your correlation, is now down to 67%. That's a problem. Okay. Now, why is it a problem? So I'm going to put this slide up, which confuses people very often. That is the actual formula for standard deviation. I just want to explain standard deviation a little easier for everyone. As I said before, if somebody averages 140 gallons, and every delivery of the 200,000 deliveries that they did in the study were 140 gallons, the standard deviation would be 0, meaning how far are you deviating at any given time from your average? Well, if every delivery is 140, then it's 0. If you had half of your deliveries at 200 and half at 140, your deviation is going to be 30 gallons away, right in between. Now, when we took these 200,000 deliveries, what we saw was as follows. We saw that the typical delivery is 14% off what is considered normal. Okay? So therefore, what we see is that on a 150-gallon delivery, on the 140, you're going to be as much as 18 gallons away. This is the problem that we have in the industry, because it's very nice that if we used K factors and we said, we're going to go to 220 gallons, our problem would be, standard in the industry would be to be 14% away, which is 31 gallons. What that means in layman's terms is this. If you thought you were delivering 220 gallons, it would be considered normal to deliver 251 gallons or to deliver 189. Okay, so I'll repeat that. If you thought you were delivering 220 gallons, it would be considered normal if you ended up delivering between 189 and 251. So what do we do in our industry? We think to ourselves, that's scary. I can't deliver the 220 because it might be 251, therefore it's going to be a runout. I'm going to go to 200. Well, that's still in the 230 range. I'm going to go to 190. I'm going to go to 180. And sure enough, we end up going all the way down to 165. And according to the studies that Angus has done, you end up averaging 150. Because when you go to 165, obviously you're not hitting it each time. So that's really the issue that we have, that we can't necessarily see what is going on there. Therefore, we have to go down because we're guessing based on HDDs, which I think I've now shown you over the last 20 minutes or so, do not correlate perfect to what we are doing on consumption. Now, Allie, I think you wanted to do another poll at this point.
Yep. So based upon everything that you heard today, if you could let us know how you feel about K factors now, or as they relate to your deliveries.
Okay, and I'm just looking at the numbers and holding true to your first poll. Most of the people are in the middle one. I knew there was delivery inefficiencies. Allie, I can't read till the end of it. If you can just tell me what the full middle one is.
Sure. The middle one is I knew there were delivery inefficiencies, but I didn't realize how much.
Okay, so that's good for everybody to know, and it does take a webinar like this, and kudos to everybody that's on this webinar, that, again, K Factors have worked. They've worked for your parents, they've worked for your grandparents. That goes all the way back to 1962, I think, is when K Factors started. But nobody understood how inefficient it was, because it used to be that HDDs matched pretty well. It just doesn't work anymore. There are so many people using either wood pellets, or they have a Nest system and literally turn their heat off, and when they're a half hour from the house, they go on their phone and they turn the heat up to 72 and they walk in the house and it's nice and toasty. We don't know when that's happening, and therefore it's become more inefficient. So when you're answering, I knew there were delivery inefficiencies, but I never realized how bad it was, really what you're saying is, I knew there were, but it's gotten worse. So it's really not your fault. It's just a matter of things have gotten worse and we need to understand better how to handle it. All right, I'm going to move on so we can be done within the next 5 minutes. Okay, so as we said, this is how you know when to fill up, right? If we had something like this on our tanks, and tank monitors obviously is one good example. This is not a seminar about tank monitors, but that is the idea of a monitor. If you did know what was going on, you would certainly be able to understand better and be less efficient, be more efficient, because you would understand exactly when to deliver as opposed to counting on the HDDs, right? What if your car didn't have a monitor? And by the way, just so everybody knows, the first Volkswagen that came out, the Volkswagen Beetle in 1950 something, don't quote me on that, did not have a gauge. So how funny is that people were riding around exactly like we said. They had a car, and every so often you went to the gas station because you had absolutely no idea how much gas was in the tank. This is what we're doing every day. And the impact of fewer deliveries because of it happens. We end up, the impact of more deliveries becomes an issue. We deliver more because we're just not sure what's going on. We start with a low number of the 165. We average 140 to 150 because we don't know what's going on. If you knew what was going on, if you, for example, did have a tank monitor and understood every day what was in the tank, this is what you would see. Economics 101, right? You have gallons delivered per year, an example, 900. Somebody has a 75-gallon tank, you would be at $675 in profit. Standard fixed SG&A cost per customer is around 200. That's a study done by many different companies in our industry. If 6 deliveries cost you 50, and I really should update this, we're seeing more in the $60 range, as I said to you, you would end up making about 175. If you eliminated 2 deliveries, instead of doing 6.2 deliveries on average, you did 4 and change because you knew what was in the tank and did it the right way, you're bringing your profitability up to 245. This is, as my wife says, my dear Aunt Sally, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. That's all this is. And you go from 175 to 245. That's a big number. And that's why I started off saying we really can get to a 40% more efficient delivery, which adds to 40% more profitability. Okay, so to recap, as we said, correlation of consumption and weather don't match for what counts most, which is individual deliveries to individual customers. Correlation works if you did all 200,000 deliveries on one day a year to all 1,000 customers. As you go from there to correlating by delivery to correlating by individual delivery to individual customers, you'll remember it went from 94% all the way down to 67%. A few runouts lead you to make many small deliveries. We get scared. And therefore, as I showed you on the deviation page, if you wanted to get to 180, you would probably be up to a maximum of 211, 212. Would we do it? We're still too scared because we don't have a one to run out, so we go down to 165. That's a problem. K Factor is a good gauge. Okay, we're not knocking it that nobody should look at it, but to your customer on an aggregate level. K Factors cannot match, though, on the individual level, leaving with an efficiency cap. The only way to make the most efficient deliveries is to know exactly what's in a tank every day. Okay, K Factors were the best thing. They're still good. They were the best thing, but Mission 220 can be accomplished and you can increase your deliveries by 40%. The question is, will you? And there's many, many different ways to go around that. Obviously, we're going to open this up to questions as well, but these are conversations that need to be had individually with companies. We've done a lot of studies with various companies that Angus works with. We've seen people with averages of 130. We've seen people with averages of 170 that don't have as much of an issue. But all of them can be helped. All of them can move that dial forward if they just concentrate on understanding what's really going on in that tank. We'll get to that in a second. All right, so should we open it up to questions? Ted, did you have the questions there?
Yes, absolutely. And again, a reminder, you can ask questions through the question feature and go to webinar. We did have a couple come in here. I'm going to read the first one to you, Danny. Are there other ideas besides tank monitors that can increase my average delivery size?
Absolutely. Again, this is about efficiencies. This isn't necessarily about tank monitors itself. I think the best example that Angus preaches very often is you should be getting more people onto a budget. Okay, why do you do smaller deliveries? Some of you are thinking on the phone, this has nothing to do with K factors. It has nothing to do with anything. My customer can't afford more than 125 gallons. Because at $3, that's $375, and he only has $300 in his pocket, so I have to deliver him a smaller amount. To me, that's giving in. I think a customer like that has to be told, we can give you a better price if you were just willing to let us do less deliveries a year. If someone was on a budget, you can deliver 180 gallons at a time and therefore save a delivery and a half to do deliveries. Why? Because it wouldn't matter to the customer. He's getting a 180-gallon delivery during the winter, and he's quote-unquote not paying for it because he's paying a certain amount every month. So there's an idea to bring more efficiency. Again, it's not going to bring you to 2 to 210 because you're going to be scared to go over that 180 number because you don't know what's in the tank. If you have monitors, that will help increase it even more. But sure, if you just put more people on budgets, guarantee you your delivery size is going to go up. Your average delivery size will go up.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. Do monitors help decrease the cost per delivery as well?
Do monitors? Yes. But again, keep in mind that the cost per delivery is not the end-all answer. There's a lot of stuff that Angus is doing right now to understand. We want to granularly bring down for each company what is the cents per gallon delivered. That's really where we're going to over the next few months on a big study that Angus is working on. Because interestingly, if you're saying, I'll make a joke, but if you're at 60 gallons per delivery, how do you bring the cost of the delivery down? Well, the answer is do more deliveries. Right? Get more trucks, do more deliveries. You're not going to make more money. You'll probably make less money, but you'll bring it down to $50 or $40 a delivery. So you can see it's not the end-all answer. It's certainly something we track because we try to be efficient and we take that number into account. So yes, we want to bring your cost per delivery down, but realistically, we want to massage that number again and again and again, and eventually get to what would be cents per gallon delivered, which will take into account all of your trucks, the cost of the truck, the maintenance of the truck, the insurance of the truck, the diesel underneath the truck, the driver, the wages, the overtime, etc. We want to take all that in and decide where you fit into the average for cents per gallon delivered and go from there. So it's a start, yes, that you can decrease your dollars per delivery, but we want to do it even more granularly as time goes on. And, Angus can certainly help with it, but a lot of you have some really good back office systems and companies behind them. Use them and let them help you as well.
Excellent. If there's any other questions, please give you a couple seconds here to submit them. If not, Danny, would you mind going? I think you have some information on thank you.
Yeah.
If not, we do have our next webinar April 2nd. That's going to be on propane training requirements. If you would like to get in touch with Danny and do not have his contact information, please feel free to reach out to myself and I can connect you with him. But with that being said, Danny, thank you very much. Well done, and I appreciate everyone's time this morning.
Very good. Hope you guys enjoyed.
Okay. Take care.